Hot Cocoa Hearts by Susanne Nelson, Chapter 11. What do you mean the kiss was bad? Jez's screech was so incredulous, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. It wasn't even really a kiss. I flopped back against the pillows of my bed, tucking my blanket tighter around me to ward off the chill that seemed to be permeating every corner of our house. Outside, the snow was falling thick and fast. He got my cheek. Because you moved? Do we really need to review the rules of kissing? When a guy is coming in for a landing, you don't move the runway. I know, I groaned. I sort of froze. I shifted uncomfortably on the bed, remembering the weird hesitation that had come over me just before his lips met mine. I tried to pull up any recollection of fireworks or blazing sparks I could find. There wasn't a trace. Not even a fizzle. Jez was all serious now. This is just your expectations meshing with reality. You've spent so much time dreaming about this, there's no way it could possibly live up to the fairy tale you created in your head. And now that you've gotten the first kiss over with, the second one can only be better. Absolutely, I said, feeling an inkling of confidence returning. By the way, thanks for helping Sawyer with my gifts. The camera is awesome. What? He told me one of my friends gave him Secret Santa pointers. I smiled into the phone. You denied it before, but now the secret's out. It had to be you. There was surprised silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't M, I swear. He didn't talk to me about the Secret Santa stuff at all. My brow furrowed. But if you didn't help him, who did? Don't know. Maybe Lyra? Or Nissa? Maybe, I mumbled. But did Lyra or Nissa know me well enough to give Sawyer such dead-on suggestions? I wasn't sure. I was interrupted by a knock sounding on my bedroom door. I lifted my head off the pillow to see Mom sticking her head around the door, motioning for me to come downstairs. Jez, I gotta go, I said into the phone. I'll call you tomorrow? Sure, she said. It's looking like it'll definitely be a snow day. Once I hung up the phone, the pitching of my insides returned. Each time I thought about the missed kiss, heated embarrassment filled me. Trying to shake it off, I went downstairs to see what Mom needed. I found her in her office, frantically printing out pictures and burning files onto CDs. Piles of order forms and papers were scattered across the floor. Whoa, I took in the mess. Did the storm blow through here too? Funny, Mom mumbled, her eyes never shifting from her computer screen. No, I'm trying to get these orders printed and ready before the weather gets any worse. I'm supposed to drop off a bunch of holiday cards at people's houses tomorrow, but with the storm, who knows if the power will hold out? Really? I glanced at the window to see snow piling up rapidly on its sill. I didn't think it was supposed to be that bad. I don't know. Her voice had a frazzled edge. It's coming down hard already. The wind gave a low moan, and I instinctively flipped up the hood of my sweatshirt. Did you need help with something? Mom snapped her fingers, as if she'd just remembered. Yes! Hot cider. Could you make your dad a cup? He's down in the basement. I've tried everything to get him out of this funk he's in, but right now I've got so much to do. Maybe you could cheer him up. Sure, I said quickly, knowing that I was mostly responsible for his funk to begin with. Do you want some too? It was what we always did on snowy nights like this. Dad usually lit a fire, and we sat around the Christmas tree, sipping cider and playing cheesy board games. I'm gonna make myself a cup. Not right now. She flipped through her papers, muttering to herself. I left Mom to her chaos, made 2 cups of cider, and headed for the basement. The second I reached the bottom stair, I regretted it. Dad was in his recliner, his eyes on the television, his smile even sadder than usual. When I glanced at the screen, I understood why. There was 6-year-old me, clad in pajamas and laughing wildly on Christmas morning as I raced to the pile of presents under the tree. As I tore open the first package, Grandma scooped me onto her lap, kissing the top of my head while I unwrapped a doll. I forgot all about that doll, I said, suddenly remembering that I'd called her Posy. I took her everywhere with me. Dad gave a start at seeing me there, in the room, and then he nodded. Grandma went to a dozen toy stores to find that doll. It was sold out almost everywhere, but she wouldn't rest until she got one for you." "I didn't know that," I said quietly. Dad sighed. "Look at that smile." He stared at the wide-eyed, giggling little girl, filling the screen. Magic. I felt a pang of guilt, and looked away from the television. "I brought you some cider," I offered, holding it out to him. He shook his head. "Thanks, but my heartburn's acting up tonight, so I'll pass." "Oh, okay." I searched for something cheery to say. "Well, do you want to come upstairs? If you're lucky, I might even let you beat me in a round of Christmasopoly." Dad glanced up in surprise. "You hate that game." I shrugged. "As long as you don't start doing Jimmy Stewart impressions halfway through, I'll survive." He laughed softly, and for a second, he looked like he was going to get up. Then he shook his head. "No, it's all right. Go on back upstairs. Don't worry about me." My heart sagged. "Okay," I said. "Let me know if you change your mind." I took the stairs slowly, my spirits fading. This was what I'd wanted for months. A Christmas without Hallmark fanfare and campy traditions. But without my dad's schoolboy excitement, without the eye rolls I exchanged with Mom over his ridiculous parodies of Christmas carols and his recitations from It's a Wonderful Life, everything felt wrong. As I passed the family room on the way to the kitchen, my eyes fell on the darkened fireplace, and I shivered. This time, more from loneliness than cold. His head bent toward me, and his arms wrapped around my shoulders. His face was in shadow, but I knew it was right. His lips came close to mine. My heart bubbled with happiness and expectation, and... "Em!" The voice broke through my delicious reverie. "Emery, sweetie, wake up!" I reluctantly opened my eyes, feeling instant disappointment. It was morning, I was in my bed, and Mom was standing at the door, calling my name. It had only been a dream. "Hey, sleepyhead," Mom said. "Good news, school is canceled, but Dad and I are going out for a bit." "Huh?" I tried to shake off my drowsiness. "Why?" "It's still snowing, coming down steady." Mom motioned to the window, and I could see at least a foot piled up on the rooftops across the street. "But I've got to deliver these orders. We're going now, just in case the roads turn icy." She turned to the hallway. "We'll be back by lunch." "Okay, bye," I mumbled, flopping back onto the pillow. I was glad to have a snow day. It made me feel like a little kid. A few minutes later, I heard the rumble of Dad's SUV pulling out of the driveway. Yanking the covers over my head, I tried to go back to sleep. But after tossing and turning for a while, I finally gave up, got dressed, and trudged downstairs for some cereal. As I ate, the loneliness I'd felt last night returned. Without Mom and Dad, the house was too quiet. I picked up my cell to call Jez, then stopped. I realized, with a jolt of surprise, that it wasn't Jez I really wanted to talk to right now. I think I knew why. There was someone else I was really missing. I dumped the rest of my cereal, scribbled a note to my parents, grabbed my sled from the garage, and headed down the sidewalk, hoping he'd be home. My heart sped up as I climbed the steps to his front porch, and I hesitated before knocking, suddenly feeling all my nerve rush out of me. I held my breath as I heard the lock turning from the inside, and when Alex opened the door, my heart leapt. It was so good to see him, and I was struck with how cute he looked. It stunned me for a moment, but a second later, I broke into a wide smile. He didn't return it, but I swallowed and pressed on. I held out the thermos I'd brought with me. "Before you say anything, it's not hot chocolate. Mine would never stand up to the competition." "You're right about that," he said gruffly. He was doing his best to look grumpy, but he was having a hard time pulling it off. I hadn't realized until this moment how much I'd missed him. "It's hot apple cider," I said, nodding toward the thermos. "A peace offering." "And," I added, as the wind blew a fresh wave of snow right into my face, "possibly a bribe for you to let me come in. I'm standing in a polar vortex here." He performed a perfect eye roll, and if I hadn't been so afraid he might shut the door in my face, I would have told him I was proud. "Come in," he finally said, swinging the door open wider. Thanks, I said in relief. Once I was standing in his kitchen, with him waiting, arms crossed. I knew I had to keep going. I took a deep breath and spoke again. I came over to say I'm sorry. I lost my temper last week. I said things I didn't mean. I don't always agree with what you think, but I heaved a sigh. Can we make up? Because the thing is, I looked into his softening eyes, my heart racing. I miss you. He was quiet for a long minute, focusing on emptying the thermos into 2 cups, and my stomach tensed with worry. I didn't know what I'd do if he didn't accept my apology. Finally, his face relaxed a bit, and he handed me my cup. You make it tough to say no, Em, he finally said with a sigh. I'm sorry too. I need to learn to keep my mouth shut. Maybe I give too much advice. You do, I said, elbowing him. But some of it is pretty dead on. Listening to you is sort of like eating vegetables. I don't always want to do it, but deep inside, I know it's good for me. He stared at me over his cup, and then we both burst out laughing. That might have been the most offensive compliment I've ever heard, he said, when he finally caught his breath. You know what I mean, don't you? Yeah, he grinned, and this time there was nothing hesitant about it, and his eyes turned serious. I missed you too. My face warmed under his gaze, and I scrambled for a way to lighten things up. Yeah, well, I didn't miss you giving me the hot chocolate hard sell all of the time. He took a sip of his cider. This is good, but hot chocolate is better. I snorted. You'll never learn when to quit, will you? His eyes glinted with challenge. Neither will you. And here I thought I'd find you weak and vulnerable from being sick. He shook his head. Oh no, Abuelo had me take a temescal herb steam treatment, and I'm way better. In response to what must have been my blank look, he added, It's an old Oaxacan tradition. Oh, cool. So if you're feeling better, do you think you'd be up for some sledding? I walked by the hill at Main Street Park, and it's got at least 2 feet of hard-packed snow now. That spot was my dad's favorite sledding hill. Alex nodded enthusiastically. I've been cooped up in this house all week. Sounds great. Just let me go upstairs and get the okay from Abuelo. Tell him I promise not to throw any snowballs at your poor stuffy nose unless you really deserve it. My nose isn't stuffy anymore. Alex laughed as he headed for the stairs in the foyer. And I don't think it's me he's going to be worried about. Truce! I cried as another snowball smacked me on the head. I sputtered, wiping snow off my frozen lips. Hey, have you no mercy? I'm calling a truce! Another snowball flew toward me, and I ducked behind the sled, using it as a barricade. Didn't you know I'm going to be a pitcher for the school baseball team? Alex called to me as another snowball whizzed by, nearly missing my shoulder. No, I called back through my laughter. I'm not exactly up on the sports extracurriculars, remember? Well, that was before you met me. I expect you to come to at least 1 game. Lying under the sled for protection, I shimmied on my stomach toward the tree. I can probably live with a baseball game or 2, as long as I'm not forced into any spirit wear. Hey, if you ever wore anything with the school mascot on it, I'd be disappointed. I lifted up the edge of the sled for long enough to launch a snowball his way, hitting him square in the back. Gotcha! I shouted gleefully, then jumped up with the sled to run for the steep hill on the outskirts of Main Street Park. If I could beat him to the top, maybe I could sled down again before he fired his armful of snowballs at me. Breathless and laughing, I made it to the crest of the hill, jumped on the sled, and pushed off with my hands. The sled picked up speed as it whooshed downward, and I raised my fist in a victory pump as I got closer to Alex, who was still running uphill. Not so fast, show-off, he grinned wickedly, dropping every snowball but one, and made a dive for the sled. I shrieked as he sat down behind me and grabbed me around the waist, then crushed a snowball right on top of my hat. Hey! I yelled, squirming away. The right side of the sled tilted, throwing me off balance. Watch out! Alex hollered. We're going to tip! Suddenly, I was airborne, the wind whistling in my ears as the ground rushed toward me. I hit the snow and tumbled straight into Alex, who was sprawled a few feet away. I closed my eyes on impact, and then lay there laughing so hard that the only sound I could make was a panting wheeze. I opened my eyes to see Alex's face inches from mine. his breath warm on my cheek, his eyes full of laughter. It felt like we were connected by some force pulling us together, but in a good way, not like the nervous uncertainty I felt around Sawyer. There was a fresh, soapy scent to Alex's skin, and starbursts of gold around his pupils, like drops of honey in pools of chocolate. How had I never noticed how cool his eyes were before? "Are you still alive?" Alex murmured. I shook off my confusion of emotions and focused on reality by giving him a playful smack on the back of his head. "I might be, if you would get off me." I shoved him gently away so that I could sit up, then glared at him. "You fight dirty." He grinned, shrugging. "Whoever said snowball fights had to be fair?" I was already packing a snowball behind my back, ready to launch a surprise attack, but the wind suddenly screamed across the hill with such force that I had to put out a hand to brace myself. Alex scooted closer to me to act as a windbreak, and for a minute, both of us tucked our faces into our jacket collars to ward off the stinging snow. "Where did that come from?" I said when the howling died down enough for my voice to be heard. Alex glanced up at the sky. "I don't remember the clouds being so dark when we first got here, do you?" I shook my head. Sure enough, the sky was a heavy gray, and the snow was whipping around us furiously, starting to blow into drifts at the base of the hill. The storm was supposed to be ending by now. "Looks like it's getting worse." Alex stood up and offered me a hand. "We should go. I'll walk you home." The clouds grew more ominous as we walked, and in the few minutes it took us to reach the other side of the park, the snow was falling so heavily I could only see a foot or two in front of me. As we ducked our heads into the bitter wind and pushed on, I was glad we were only a few blocks from my house, but gladder to have Alex beside me. It was getting harder to see, and when Alex reached out his hand to me, I took it, the steady pressure of his fingers in mine grounding me in the blinding snow. Finally, I saw glowing colors through the blanket of white, and relief rushed through me. "The Holly Jolly House!" I yelled over the wind. I'd never thought it could happen, but I was actually happy for the thousands of lights guiding us home. As we got to our front yard, I saw Dad struggling to right some reindeer that had fallen over in the wind and were already half buried in snow. He waved us toward the house, yelling, "Everything's blowing over! I'm trying to stake a few things down!" Alex offered to help, but Dad shook his head. "It's getting too cold. You two go inside. I won't stay out much longer." We nodded and climbed the front porch steps, bracing ourselves against the fierce wind. Mom met us at the door. "Thank goodness," she said, hugging us both in relief. "I was about to send Dad out to get you." She gestured to the TV, which was on the Weather Channel. "It's a full-blown blizzard. Caught everyone by surprise." She turned to Alex. "I called your grandfather, and he's walking over. I tried to convince him to stay home, but he said it would be a good excuse to try out his new snowshoes." Alex rolled his eyes. "That sounds like Abuelo." I slid the scarf down from my mouth and grinned at Alex, who was covered head to toe in white. "You could pass for an abominable snowman." "Look who's talking, Ice Queen." "Both of you need to get changed and warmed up before you catch a cold," Mom said, as a blast of wind shook the shutters on the front of the house. "Alex, I'll bring you some of Mr. Mason's clothes. They'll be big, but at least they're dry." The door blew open, and Dad hobbled in, caked in snow and clutching his back. "Oh no, honey," Mom said, rushing to offer him a shoulder to lean on. "You're back?" "Some of the lights blew down, and I was trying to fix them," he said through clenched teeth. "I must have twisted the wrong way." He took another step and winced. Mom rolled her eyes at Alex and me as if to say, "I told him so." "Come on," she told Dad, holding him up. "Straight upstairs for you." Dad made a sorry attempt at shaking his head. "I've got to get them set up before the holiday stroll." "The holiday stroll will have to survive with one less strand of lights," Mom interrupted. She started for the stairs with her arms around Dad just as the lights inside flickered once and then went out. "Power's out!" I cried. Everything was coated in stormy gray shadows, the lights both inside the house and out. "Wow," Alex said. "We never got these in California." "There's a fire going in the family room," Mom said as she and Dad took one painstaking step at a time. "If you're careful, you can roast marshmallows in the fireplace. Em, light the candles on the mantel. I'll check on you two in a bit. May as well get comfy. We're in for quite a storm.